Hi guys, Laura here. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited today because I'm going to share with you my June TBR. And I have to say, I really hope I have enough reading time during June because the titles I have picked out are really good titles and I am so excited about all of them and I really want to get to them. So here we go, let's get into the books. So I do most of my reading from the library. I've always been a big supporter of the library, which is one reason why my bookshelves don't have more books on them than they do. And so what I do is I go to the library every couple of weeks, and the very first thing I always do is I head straight to the new books section. And my library, and probably most other libraries, have an area where they put all the new books that come in when they first check them in. Before they put them on the regular shelves, they just put them on these new bookshelves for a while so that you can have a chance to look them over to see what's new. And I always kind of have my feelers on about titles that are out that I'm kind of looking for. So I go to these new bookshelves and see what they have to see if there's anything available that catches my eye that I've been wanting to read. Now, sometimes the really big titles they have holds on them and they're checked out, but I've been surprised pleasantly several times when I've been able to find titles on the new bookshelf that I wanted to read. And the first two books in my June TBR are exactly that. I found them when I checked out the new bookshelf at the library. The first title is The Guest Book. This is by Sarah Blake. And I didn't hear much about this, but I noticed in May, this came out in May, and when it came out, it was all over my social media feed on Instagram and Twitter, and I just recognized the cover. I didn't know anything about it. So when I saw this on the new bookshelf at the library, I decided to pick it up and see if maybe I would be interested in it. And basically what this is, I believe, it's historical fiction. It's a story that starts in the summer of 1936 on an island in Maine. This family has this island, and something happens in 1936 that has repercussions that go into the future of that family. And so we follow through this book this family through 2 or 3 different generations through time and find out what it is that happened and how this affected the people in this family for years to come. And I wanted to read part of the inside flap. This is the part that really hooked me. It says, "The guest book asks how we remember and what we choose to forget. It shows the untold secrets we inherit and pass on, unknowingly echoing our parents and grandparents. Sarah Blake's triumphant novel tells the story of a family and a country that buries its past in quiet until the present calls forth a reckoning." That sounds like exactly my kind of book. I love historical fiction and I love stories that are big sweeping family sagas, and you have all kinds of family relationships that get pulled into the story. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Plus it takes place on an island in Maine in the summertime at the beginning of the story, which it sounds like a perfect read for the summertime. All right. The second book I got also came from the new bookshelf, and that is Spring by Ali Smith. Now I've heard several people on BookTube talk about this, particularly some UK booktubers that I follow. They've mentioned this before, and what I know about this book is, I don't know a lot. What I know is that Ali Smith has written, I don't know if you could really call them series, because I don't know if the books have anything to do with each other, other than the fact that they all have a name of a season as the title. So far she's written Autumn and Winter, and then this is Spring that just came out this spring, and then another book called Summer is forthcoming at some point. I'm not sure when. Basically, from what I understand, this is a novel, a fictional novel that invokes the feeling of spring. And by that, I think it's, spring is a time when there are a lot of new changes, a new life, and there's just a sense of hope about the future in the spring. And so I get a feeling that whatever the story is in this book, that feeling of the hope for the future is what comes forth. And that's where the name comes from. The next book I also got from the library, but it is an audiobook that I checked out using my Libby app. I like to go out at lunchtime on my breaks at work and take a half an hour walk every day. And when I do that, I listen to audiobook. This is one of those audiobooks. This is called Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. Now, this is the first in a series. I think there are 2 so far that have been published, and I believe a 3rd one is due to come out. This is middle grade fantasy, and I've heard so many booktubers talking about this, about how great it is. And I've heard them compare it, well, they say it's a lot like Harry Potter. You get Harry Potter vibes. It's not exactly the same, but you kind of get that feel from it. And that's where my interest came in, because I love Harry Potter and it's one of my favorite series. And so when I heard about this, I thought, I'm going to check this out. In this story, we follow Morrigan Crow, which is a girl who basically she is cursed. And her whole family and everyone in the town has been telling her whole life that she is cursed. And everything bad that happens in the town, whether it's weather or a car accident or anything that happens that's not good, it's her fault. And basically she's shunned by the town. And there is this idea where she lives that these cursed children something's going to happen and they're all going to die midnight of their 11th birthday. I believe that's what it is. And so it's approaching Morgan's birthday. She knows that she's expected to die soon. She's kind of resigned herself to the fact this is her fate. This is just going to happen. And just before it can happen, this strange man named Jupiter North shows up at her house, and he's going to take her away. He's taking her to this other world called Nevermore, and he is from the Wondrous Society, and he wants to sponsor Morrigan to be a new member of the Wondrous Society. So she goes off with him, and when she gets to Nevermore, she discovers you're not just automatically in the Wondrous Society. To get into the society, you have to pass basically 4 tests, 4 challenges, which is where the title, The Trials of Morrigan Crow, comes in. She has to go through these 4 trials to prove herself worthy to get in. We're following Morrigan to see if she gets into the Wonder Society. All right, I also have a second audiobook from the library. It is The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. And this is a title that it's also recently, I think it came out in April of 2019. And this is a book that I heard about first from Ann Bogle at the podcast, What Should I Read Next? She recommended this book as something to read this summer. And I have to agree, it sounded like a light kind of read and something that I would like to listen to on my outside walks. Basically, the way I understand this book is that this is based on the idea that when you get married, you're not just marrying your husband, you're also marrying his family. And in this story, we follow Lucy, who is getting married, and she wants to have a close relationship with her mother-in-law. She always hoped that that would happen. Unfortunately, her mother-in-law is kind of a distant person, and she's very busy, and she has a lot going on in her own life. And so they never really developed the close relationship that Lucy wanted. And then, I guess 10 years into the marriage, all of a sudden, her mother-in-law turns up dead with a suicide note. And basically, something isn't right about the circumstances of her death. It doesn't make sense that it's a suicide. And so they start looking into what's going on, and Lucy discovers that there's a secret the family's been hiding. And so we have to find out what was the mother-in-law hiding? How is she different from what Lucy thought? The next book is another book I got from the library. This is not a new book, but I got it because of the author. So earlier in this spring, I read The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton. And that was my first Kate Morton book. This was her latest book that came out last fall sometime, and I really enjoyed it. It's historical fiction that has multiple timelines and all these, it's kind of a family, although they're not all related, but all these different people weave in and out of each other's lives, and that's exactly the kind of thing I like. And after reading The Clockmaker's Daughter, I decided to check out some other backlist titles for Kate Morton. So at the library, I picked up The House at Riverton, this is an old one. This was actually published in 2009, and it's kind of a worn copy that I got from the library. From what I understand, this book, it starts with Grace, who is in her 90s and she's living in a nursing home. And she is approached by this younger woman who is a movie producer. And there is a movie that's in production that they're working on. And it is about something that happened in the 1920s at Riverton Manor, which was the basis for this book. And they have contacted Grace because they want some feedback, because they're trying to be as realistic and accurate as they can be. And Grace, in her 90s, is the only person who's still alive that was in the house at the time that this thing happened. This famous poet who committed suicide at the lake at Riverton House. And it was a huge news story. And so they're going back to make a movie about it. So the fact that these people approach her and bring up this event that happened in the 20s sparks some memories in Grace that she hasn't thought about in a long time. She decides, as she's starting to remember all this, she's going to record her memories to tell her story finally to her grandson, who he's not there. I don't know if he's traveling or if he lives somewhere else. I'm not sure what his story is, but she's going to explain her story to him. And so she records her story, and we go between her current time where she's recording this, and then as she remembers, she's telling us. And so we get the story as it slowly unfolds of her time. I guess she started working at Riverton Manor in 1914 as a housemaid, and I have real Downton Abbey vibes about it. There's the upstairs lords and ladies and the downstairs servants. And so basically we follow this story to see the true story of what happened when that poet killed himself. And I have a feeling there's probably more involved than what people know. Okay, so that's it for the library books. The next book is a book that I actually own. I have 2 copies of this. This is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And I also have this copy. This is the copy that I bought in 1987 when I was in college, when I first read it. I've read this multiple times. You can tell how worn it is. And then a couple of years ago, my son bought me this updated copy. This is from 2017, and it's got a new introduction written by Margaret Atwood herself. And basically this was republished. It's been republished several times. This edition is when they made the series. There's a series on Hulu based on the book, and so they republished it. I'm doing a reread of this book with April over at Getting Hygge With It is doing a reread of this book, or read if you've never read it before. And I decided to join in. This is probably, I've said, one of my favorite books of all time, and so I have no problem rereading it. It's a fairly short one. I should be able to get through it pretty easily. I will put a link to April's channel down below. The last book that I have is another book that I own. This is one that my husband and I are reading together. Actually, we're reading it in our commute. We commute to work together, and while he drives, I read aloud. And that is Hiking Naked, A Quaker Woman's Search for Balance by Iris Grayville. This is a memoir. Iris was a public health nurse who lived in Bellingham, Washington. She was a director of the public health program, and she was finding herself disillusioned with her work. She wasn't happy, and she wasn't sure if this is what she should be doing with her life. And she and her husband took a vacation to this place in remote Washington state, and it's a small town that I believe only had about 300 people total in it, and they just loved it there. They're surrounded by nature. They're cut off from the rest of the world, and this is, I think, this happened in the 1990s, and so it was before the internet. There was no internet, there's no telephone service, and there was no grocery store even. These people that lived there had to write out their grocery store order and mail it to the next town over. Then the grocery store would package up the order and send it over on the ferry, so they would have to mail order their groceries. very different. She and her husband and her 2 children moved to this town, and we follow them in their adventures of living in this remote place, and then also her decision about leaving her other life behind and wrestling with that. So those are the books I have that I'm prepared to read in June. I'm so excited about them. Check back with me later to see how I do on that. If you've read any of these books, please let me know. Which ones do you think I should prioritize? Let me know what you think. What are you going to read in June? Please let me know that as well. Don't forget to subscribe. That's it for me today. I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye.